The rise of New York mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani has injected new life into the political debate in the United States, at a time when Donald Trump has strengthened his grip on power and stoked fears of a constitutional crisis. On Friday, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the U.S. president, limiting the ability for smaller courts to block his sweeping executive decisions. The Trump administration has grown increasingly frustrated with local judges who have tried to pull the handbrake on the mass deportation of undocumented immigrants, the crackdown on educational institutions and their students, and most controversially, their attempts to end birthright citizenship in the U.S. Critics of the administration say this ruling would effectively allow Trump to rule by decree, removing any obstacle between him and what they describe as his authoritarian tendencies. But the surprise victory of 33-year-old Mamdani in the Democratic primary in New York, a campaign he ran on an explicitly anti-capitalist, pro-immigrant and pro-Palestinian platform, has presented the first real political challenge not only to Trump and the Republicans, but the Democratic establishment itself. A party many feel has strayed from its roots and its base. So is politics in the U.S. changing, or is Trump's image of America too powerful to oppose? To tell us more, we're joined by the editor-in-chief and founder of Zateo News, Mehdi Hasan. Mehdi, welcome to MEELive.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about Zohran Mamdani, a pro-Palestinian anti-capitalist who has electrified the political landscape and has also become a lightning rod for attacks, some deeply Islamophobic ones. What do you make of the reaction to Mamdani's win?
The reaction to the win has been truly depressing for those of us who live in the US and are immigrants, members of minority communities, non-white, Muslim, and I tick all of those boxes. It is depressing. It's despicable. People talk about us going back to a post-9/11 moment. It's worse than post-9/11. The racism, the bigotry, the Islamophobia, it's not just more prevalent. It's not just more brazen, it's more mainstream. You have elected members of Congress saying the kind of racist things that even Republicans in George Bush and Dick Cheney's party were not saying 20 years ago after 9/11. You have some members of Congress calling him a jihadist, others saying he could lead to another 9/11. You have one member of Congress saying he should be denaturalized and deported and calls him Little Muhammad. I mean, the racism and Islamophobia is so in your face. And so despicable and disgusting. And the Democrats have also either A, not called this stuff out, or B, they have members of their own party indulging in Islamophobic rhetoric. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, Zohran Mamdani's own state, did a radio interview where she referred to him invoking the global jihad, which of course is something he's never done. So the obsession with Mamdani being Muslim, being an immigrant, it's kind of just reminded us of the white supremacist moment that the United States is in right now.
Of course, his campaign has been proudly pro-Palestinian and very critical of Israel in a state where he was running up against several candidates who, in the debate, for example, had promised to visit Israel as their first stop after they were elected. Yeah. He said that he wouldn't. When you interviewed him, he said that he would arrest Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu if he set foot in New York. Is this victory a sign that criticism of Israel is no longer taboo in U.S. politics?
A great question. I would say a couple of things. Number one, when I interviewed him last November, first time in person, I think he was at like 1% in the polls when I did that interview with him. So when he said, "Oh, I'll arrest Netanyahu," I asked him, "What would you do? What's your reaction to the ICC arrest warrant?" I kind of didn't take it seriously. I was like, this is a lefty candidate who's saying what he has to say. But, you know, he surprised and shocked us all, including myself. And, you know, his rhetoric on Israel has been pretty mainstream, I would argue. You know, people trying to make him out to be some extremist. I mean, Netanyahu is wanted by the International Criminal Court. Every human rights group in the world is condemning Israeli abuses in Gaza. But on this specific issue of Israel and its role as a campaign issue, that debate was deeply disturbing, where every candidate said, "I'm going to go to Israel, I'm going to go to Israel." And he said, "Well, I'm going to go meet Jews in New York synagogues because I'm the mayor of New York. Why should I go to a foreign country?" Which is a perfectly reasonable answer, which I think most New Yorkers and most Americans would agree with. This weird fealty that American politicians feel they have to give to Israel, especially in New York. I think we are slowly breaking that taboo. And the argument is, oh, well, it's the city with the biggest Jewish population outside of Israel. Therefore, New York is the city with the biggest population of many minority communities outside of their countries. I think it has more Puerto Ricans than in Puerto Rico. It has more Bangladeshis than any other city outside of Bangladesh. More Puerto Ricans than any place outside of Puerto Rico. Doesn't mean every mayoral candidate has to go to Bangladesh or Puerto Rico as a first stop. This bizarre obsession with Israel. It's funny because critics of Israel are accused of being obsessed with Israel. It's the other way around. Zohran Mamdani didn't want to talk about Israel. He wanted to talk about free buses and free childcare and the freezing the rents. Those were his three main policies. It's the media that's obsessed during the campaign with, do you support Israel's right to exist? And now since he won the first round, obsessing over, what about your support for globalize the Intifada? Which again, a phrase he's never said nor supported. He simply said, I'm not going to condemn it because some people see it as a way of resisting Israeli occupation and apartheid. Is the taboo broken? Slowly, and it is being broken. I don't know we can say it's fully broken, because he hasn't won the mayoral race yet. When he wins the mayoral race, if he wins the mayoral race, then yes, I think we can say the pro-Israel lobby lost a pretty big race here.
Now let's talk about the political context that this race finds itself in. Last Friday, the Supreme Court ruling was seen as a major step for the Trump administration, taking away a major obstacle which has so far held them back from carrying out their most sweeping policy changes, whether birthright citizenship bans, to mass deportations, to the deportation or attempted deportation of pro-Palestinian students like Mahmoud Khalil. Is there anything that is standing in their way now of being able to enact those policies?
I mean, this was always the fear that some of us tried to articulate last year, and we were dismissed by a lot of people, including on the left and in pro-Palestinian circles. This idea that Trump would be existentially threatening to the pro-Palestinian cause. The argument last year from a lot of people was, well, Democrats, Republicans are as bad as each other. Biden and Harris are complicit in a genocide, therefore it can't get any worse. And my point was, it can get worse in Gaza, and it has gotten worse in Gaza, sadly. We're seeing the images of starving children. We're seeing the ethnic cleansing. The massacres continue, including yesterday. But even in the US, it's gotten worse in terms of what freedoms we have to speak out, right? This argument that, they're all the same. Well, look, I don't think anyone, even me, a big anti-Trump person, even I didn't expect that in their first 100 days they were going to go after a green card holder, right? Everyone knew they were going to go after undocumented immigrants, what they call illegals. But to go after a permanent resident, just this week they announced that they're going to bring in, they're going to double down on denaturalization, like stripping citizenship away from naturalized American citizens like myself, immigrants who've come to this country and become citizens. So the crackdown on speech, on your presence in this country, on your ability to protest, that is ramping up like crazy. And they have a Supreme Court that's willing to protect them, right? Donald Trump has a 6-3 majority in the Supreme Court. He appointed 3 of the 6 conservative justices himself. And this was the worry. This is what some of us tried to warn about throughout 2024, that this is not just any other president or any other right-wing Republican. This is an authoritarian who has the intent and the desire to crack down on free speech and free assembly and free protest, and has the institutions on board to help him do it. He has a Congress that has rolled over for him, and he has a Supreme Court that is running cover for him.
I'm glad you brought up this conversation that took part before the elections, and you were very critical in the lead up to those elections against people who had chosen to boycott the Democrats over their enabling of genocide in Gaza. How do you think the situation would be different now, talking about Israel and talking about Gaza, if Kamala Harris was in office today?
So I just want to correct the premise of your question. A lot of people get this wrong, not just you. I didn't criticize people for wanting to boycott the Democratic Party. I said everyone has a right to, and I totally understand why people wouldn't want to vote for Harris and Biden. I didn't want to vote for Harris or Biden, right? They were complicit in a genocide. She had every chance to break from Biden. She refused to do it, Harris. So she got what she deserved. And they messed up big time. So I wasn't one of those people, and I completely understand why people didn't want to vote for the Democratic Party. It was a horrible, horrible choice. No one wanted the choice of Trump v. Biden or Trump v. Harris. But that's the choice we had. My criticism was of those people who played down the threat from Trump. I have no problem with people saying Harris is bad, I can't vote for Harris. Completely understand that. But my problem was with those people who thought Trump would somehow be the same or even better. I mean, 1 in 3 Muslims, depending on some polls, voted for Donald Trump. The mind boggles, right? That many people in Michigan, big Arab American center, believed the bullshit from Trump that he was going to be the anti-war guy. I had a Yemeni American imam from Michigan who endorsed Trump, spoke at his rally, telling me that Trump would be the peace candidate. I would love to speak to him again now. He won't come back on my show to ask him what he thinks about the illegal and unconstitutional strike on Iran. I met a Pakistani guy the other day who said he voted for Trump thinking that Trump was going to free Imran Khan. How did that work out? So there was a lot of lies told by Trump, and a lot of people in Arab and Pakistani and pro-Palestinian communities that bought it up. And those people I was critical of, for sure. And Trump I was very critical of, because my argument is that it doesn't, of course, Democrats and Republicans are both bad on Gaza. We know that. No one's ever said otherwise. The issue is Trump is bad on every issue. And Trump is such a chaos candidate, such an authoritarian president, that the argument I would make is that if you had any other president in office, whether it's Harris or Biden or another Republican even, you would have maybe one fire to put out, two fires to put out. We could organize around one issue that we care about, Gaza or deportations or whatever it is, stopping a war in Iran. The problem with Trump is every day there are 100 fires to put out. And you see it with Gaza. Gaza got pushed off the news agenda because he went after Iran. If you care about migrants, what happened in LA got pushed off the news because he did this crazy tax bill. The problem with Trump is every day is a scandal, a controversy, a crisis, which makes those of us who are trying to fight for progress and are trying to stand up for the little guy, it's very difficult to keep your eye on the ball, because they flood the zone with bullshit, to use a line from Steve Bannon. And that's always been the problem. If you care about Gaza, if you care about Imran Khan, if you care about migrants, if you care about Iran, whatever it is you care about, it's much easier to fight for that cause, to protest and organize and do journalism when you have a quote-unquote normal president in power. That's my argument.
And with regards to the Democrats, I mean, there was a moment at the Democratic National Convention where it seemed like the Democratic Party itself was making a very clear distinction that they refused to make Gaza, despite the polls, despite how unpopular their policy was towards Israel, they refused to make it part of their campaign. They refused to even let it be injected into their election campaigning, Kamala Harris's campaign in particular. And now you are seeing the reaction to Mamdani's win from even within his own party. What do you make of where the Democrats are? Have they learned anything from what happened in November?
Well, it's a good question. The problem is, and I'm guilty of this as you are, as of any other journalist, is we talk about the Democrats as if it's one monolithic entity. The problem is, it's a party. It's not like the Republican Party, which actually is a monolithic party, right? It's a almost all white, quite elderly, super pro-Trump movement. There's not much dissent in there, as you've seen. The Democratic Party actually does have it's a very divided movement, right? It's a coalition of different races, different classes, different geographical areas, and that's what makes it difficult actually to run. But yes, the leadership for sure has not moved on Gaza. Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, the leaders in the Senate and the House, have been awful on the Middle East issues. They haven't endorsed Mamdani. Jeffries hasn't. And I think the problem now is there's a huge disconnect between the base of the Democratic Party, which is less pro-Israeli than it's ever been. I mean, a majority of Democrats now are saying, plurality of Democrats are saying they support the Palestinians over the Israelis. I think a poll showed for the first time in years. You can see the switch amongst the Democratic base. But the leadership is still stuck in that old mindset of Israel, no matter what. We must blindly defend Israel. If you criticize Israel, you're an anti-Semite. And that tension boiled over in New York, where Andrew Cuomo tried to run this, he's an anti-Semite, I'm the pro-Israel guy campaign. By the way, Andrew Cuomo was a lawyer for Benjamin Netanyahu. No one ever asked him about that, strangely. And he failed. He lost. But Eric Adams, the former Democratic mayor of New York, who's running as an independent, he's running with a new party called End Anti-Semitism, which is a cynical, ridiculous move by him. This guy hosted an anti-Semite recently at his own home. And he's running this campaign because he thinks, again, that he can kind of divide and rule the Democratic Party in this way, using anti-Semitism and Israel as a cudgel. Look, they are losing the argument within the party. The Democratic Party is becoming more and more pro-Palestinian at a grassroots level. The issue is, how long does that take to translate into an elected level? How long does it take for the grassroots to overcome the powers of the AIPACs and the military-industrial complex and all of those lobbies that push elected representatives to turn a blind eye to the genocide in Gaza? What I would say, though, by the way, is that aside from maybe Thomas Massie and crazy Marjorie Taylor Greene on the Republican side, the vast majority of the opposition to the American government's policies in Gaza still come from a minority of left-wing Democrats, from Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar and Greg Kasar and Delia Ramirez and Ro Khanna and AOC, right? they're the people who are trying to fight the good fight within their party to get their party to a more moral and more legal place on Palestine.
But there is this conversation on the right now. You mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene. There's also been Steve Bannon, Tucker Carlson, some of the people at the core of the ideology that has brought Trump to office, some of the people that Trump listens to on some of his policy decisions. They have been increasingly critical of the U.S.'s unbridled support for Israel, as well as Trump's attacks on Iran just a week ago. Meanwhile, as you mentioned, in the leadership of the Democrats, there has been few voices that are willing to criticize Israel. And this not only stops here at the political angle, it also extends to the media landscape. The New York Times, MSNBC, your former employer, of course, left-leaning voices have continued to largely stay silent. Are we witnessing some kind of political paradigm shift in the U.S. right now?
So, yes and no. I think you're right to highlight that there are clearly right-wing voices speaking out against aid to Israel and blind support for Israel in a way they haven't before, including, as you say, the Tucker Carlsons as well, the Marjorie Taylor Greenes. I wouldn't exaggerate it too much. Probably two of the biggest right-wing media organizations in this country are Fox News and the Daily Wire, and they are still super pro-Israel. In fact, there's been reporting that Donald Trump decided to bomb Iran because he watched a lot of Fox, and Fox hosts were making the case to bomb Iran. So that is the influence of right-wing media still, which is super pro-Israel. Look at the New York Post, owned by Rupert Murdoch, which is running a pro-Israel, anti-Mamdani campaign right now. So that's one point. The other point I would make is a lot of these guys who are anti-Israel now on the right, I mean, they're not anti-Israel for the reasons you and I are anti-Israel. It's not because they believe in justice and equality. It's because they're nationalists. It's because they don't want to spend money abroad. They want to spend money at home. Maybe some of them are anti-Semites. They don't like Jews. I mean, the right can have their own transformation on Israel. I'm not on the right, so let them do whatever they want to do. My point is that the genuine principled opposition is still coming from the left. And yes, the Democrats are the only people that are still even having any kind of bills about restricting aid. For example, when there's a bill in Congress to restrict aid to Israel, pretty much every Democrat signs it. I'm not even sure even Thomas Massie signs it. Marjorie Taylor Greene hasn't, for sure. So this is a real issue. When it actually comes to practical substance, it's still on the liberal left, the progressives, where we're going to have any chance of winning this conversation. And by the way, lastly, I'd say a lot of these people have horribly racist views towards Arabs and Muslims at home. So I was talking to a peace activist recently, very prominent peace activist, and they said to me, oh, big fan of Marjorie Taylor Greene. I said, seriously? She's a horrible human being. And they said, no, but she's anti-war. That's what matters. And I said, okay, but she's also anti-us, the people who live here in the US. The very next morning, Mamdani wins, or I think it was 2 days later, Mamdani wins, and Marjorie Taylor Greene posts an image of the Statue of Liberty covered in a burqa or a niqab, saying, this hits hard. So be careful, what alliances you make in the name of Gaza. I wouldn't want to ally with Islamophobes and anti-Semites in order to make sure that the Palestinians are free. But I do see, you're right, there's a change on the right, on parts of the right.
In his first term as president, there was a sense that the institutions and leaders of liberal democracies around the world were standing up to Trump's authoritarian tendencies. Fast forward 6 months, and it feels like that is a thing of the past, and now we're living in kind of a different international order. At the NATO summit last week, leaders seem to be bending over backwards not to antagonize him. Yes. I think that was exemplified in Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, accidentally calling Trump daddy. Of course, he then backtracked from that. Do you think the world itself and the way that these liberal democracies are operating is changing around Trump?
Yeah, the NATO Secretary General also sent that fawning text to Trump, written in Trumpy language with caps letters, which Trump then released. So yes, I do worry about the Macrons and the Starmers and all of those guys. There was that great image, wasn't there, when Starmer dropped his papers and bent down to pick it up at Trump's feet, and it was captured in a photo, and that was kind of US-UK relations summarized right there. It is a problem in the sense that there is a sense where people at home and abroad are less willing to resist Trump's authoritarianism, craziness, racism. There's a sense that he's more powerful this time, he's more vindictive this time. And I'm seeing that, here in the United States, in the liberal media, for example, amongst big law and the university sector, but also, as you say, foreign leaders. Mark Carney tried a bit, the new Canadian Prime Minister, because he was under such pressure. And he won because Trump was making ridiculous threats to annex Canada. But yes, I do worry that there isn't enough of an international global backlash, not just to Trump's authoritarianism, but this is a global authoritarian movement from Trump to Modi, to Netanyahu, to Putin, to Orban. It's a global movement, to Milei. And I think those people who claim to be liberal leaders, progressive leaders, if they at least claim to be, they need to kind of really stand up for the values they claim to embody. And we've seen this before, right? We've seen this throughout history when liberals and centrists, when they try and meet fascists halfway, it doesn't work. It's just a win for the fascists.
I want to ask you quickly to talk about Gaza, Doctors Under Attack. This is the documentary that was commissioned by BBC, but then they ultimately chose not to air it. Zeteo has picked it up, so has Channel 4. Why is this documentary important?
Oh, it's so important on so many levels. It's important, first of all, because the destruction, the systematic destruction of Gaza's healthcare system is one of the great crimes against humanity of the 21st century. We've not seen anything like it in our lifetimes. The number of hospitals destroyed, the number of doctors killed, the number of nurses killed, the number of paramedics killed, the eyewitness testimony from both Palestinian doctors and foreign doctors, British, American, Canadian doctors who've gone to Gaza. So this film tells that story in great detail with exclusive eyewitness testimony, including testimony from Israeli doctors talking about the complicity of their profession in Israeli torture camps, where doctors have joined in the torture of Palestinian detainees. So the film itself is absolutely vital as a story that needs to be told, but it's also vital because of the story around the story about the film itself, which is a story about censorship, about fear, about the pro-Israel lobby working British and Western media institutions and pressuring them into dropping journalistic coverage of what's happening in Gaza. So when I saw that the BBC was refusing to run it, and then I saw that they were not going to run it at all, and they were returning the rights to Basement Films, who we've worked with in the past. They made a fantastic film for us last year called Israel's Real Extremism. I knew that this was a film we had to try and platform globally, and Channel 4 have the UK rights. Zeteo will be running the film tomorrow, 5 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock in the UK. An email will go out if you're a paid subscriber. Do sign up at zeteo.com or at gazadoctors.film. Those are the websites. Check it out. Support this film. Support independent journalism. Support independent journalistic sites like Middle East Eye, like Zeteo, because the mainstream media has so miserably failed us. I know you hear people saying this, but I think on Gaza, like no other issue before, not even the Iraq war, not the financial crisis, whatever it is, no issue comes close to Gaza in terms of the absolute, abysmal, demonstrable failure of our mainstream media outlets, the credibility that the BBC has lost over the last 20, 21 months. Insane. I used to work at the BBC. I was a defender of the BBC, but on Gaza, shameful coverage, and now this decision to not run the documentary they commissioned and they signed off on early versions of. And now, advantage for us, independent media gets to put out the film and say, you know what, we're doing the job that mainstream media is no longer doing.
Perfect note to end on. Mehdi Hasan, Editor-in-Chief of Zeteo News. Thank you so much for joining us.